All right, let's dive into a question that seems super simple, but has had scientists scratching their heads for years. Who's actually in charge of your thoughts? We all kind of feel like there's a little command center, a CEO in our head calling the shots. But what if I told you that's completely wrong? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty revolutionary idea about how your mind really gets things done. Okay, first things first, let's get on the same page about this thing called working memory. The best way to think about it is like your brain's mental whiteboard, or a temporary sticky note. It's the system you are using literally right now to hold the beginning of the sentence in your head so you can understand the end of it. It's what you use to juggle a shopping list or to follow what someone is saying on the phone. It's this active, temporary workspace for, well, pretty much everything we do. And that naturally leads to a really obvious question, right? If you got all this information swirling around in your head, sights, sounds, goals, memories, who's the manager? Who's deciding what you should focus on and what you can just ignore? I mean, it really feels like there has to be someone running the show. And for a very long time, the most popular answer to that question came from a really classic model of working memory. It gave us this neat, tidy, top-down structure for how this whole system was supposedly organized. This is the famous model from Baddeley and Hitch, and it suggests you have a few little helper systems. There's the phonological loop, which is for sounds and words, when you repeat a phone number to yourself over and over. Then you've got the visuospatial sketchpad, which is for images, like when you picture the layout of your kitchen. But sitting at the very top, controlling the whole operation, was this thing called the central executive, the boss, the CEO of your brain. But here's the catch. As scientists really started digging into this idea, the so-called seer began to look less like a scientific explanation and a lot more like a convenient way to hide a mystery. And the biggest critique boils down to this one kind of weird word, homunculus. It literally means little man. For decades, critics have been pointing out that this central executive is basically just a fancy placeholder for a little man inside your brain who makes all the tough decisions. It's a way of saying you've explained control when you haven't actually explained anything at all. So why is this such a big deal? Well, because a homunculus is a scientific dead end. Saying a central executive is in charge doesn't tell us how it decides what to do. It's like trying to explain how a car works by saying, oh, there's a little driver inside who pushes all the pedals. That doesn't explain anything. It just makes you ask, okay, but who's telling the little driver what to do? It's not a real answer. And this frustration has grown into a real movement in cognitive science. The call, as you can see here, is to banish these little men, these ghosts in the machine, from our theories once and for all. It's a hunt for a real nuts and bolts explanation for how our brains actually focus and get stuff done. So, if we fire the CEO, what do we replace it with? Well, this is where a truly brilliant new way of thinking comes into the picture. It proposes something that sounds almost impossible: control without a controller. And this slide just lays out the shift perfectly. Over on the left, you've got the old model. It's a pyramid with a boss at the top making all the calls. But look to the right. The new model is this bottom-up, distributed network. The idea here is that control isn't a decision made by some single entity. Instead, it just emerges from a bunch of simple, automatic processes all working together. So let's break down how that could possibly work. All right, the first new piece is something called executive memory. Now, instead of a CEO, just picture this as a temporary holding area for the current task set. And a task set is just a fancy way of saying the instructions for what you're trying to do right now. So if your goal is to make a cup of tea, the task set in your executive memory would be stuff like boil water, find a mug, and put tea bag in mug. The second key ingredient is a huge library of what are called procedural rules. These are stored in your long-term memory, and they are super, super simple if-then statements. Things like, if the light is red, then press the brake. Or, if the goal is to find your keys, then check the hook by the door. Seriously, your brain is packed with millions and millions of these simple little rules you've learned over your lifetime. And here it is. This is the big, revolutionary idea. There is no manager. There's no one deciding which rule to use. Control is automatic. Any rule you have stored away whose if part matches what's currently in your working memory, your goal, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, it just fires. It just happens on its own. No boss needed. Now, I know that can sound a little abstract, so let's walk through a classic psychology experiment to see exactly how this managerless system can pull off a complex task with amazing precision. So imagine you're doing this task. You're going to see a colored number on a screen. If the number is, say, red, your job is to decide if it's odd or even. But if the number is blue, you have to decide if it's bigger or smaller than 5. Now, the old CEO model would say your brain's boss sees the color, decides on the task, and tells everyone what to do. But let's see how the new system handles it without anyone in charge.
Okay, boom. A red 3 pops up on the screen. The first thing that happens is the color red automatically triggers a simple rule you've learned. If I see red, then my goal is parity judgment. That goal, along with its simple instructions, gets loaded into your executive memory. Next, the digit 3 appears and enters your working memory. Now all the pieces are in place. A rule in your vast library finds a perfect match. If my goal is parity and the digit I see is 3, then categorize it as odd. That rule just fires automatically. That in turn creates a new piece of information, odd, which then triggers one final rule. If the category is odd, then press the left key. And that's it. You press the key. No CEO, no homunculus, just a lightning-fast cascade of simple automatic rules.
What this shows us is just a profound shift in thinking. The focused, goal-directed behavior we all experience every day isn't the product of some single wise decision-maker in our heads. It's an emergent property of a much simpler, more elegant, and frankly, more believable system. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it's that executive control isn't some command from on high. It actually bubbles up from the bottom, from the interaction between your current goal and that huge library of if-then rules you've built up over a lifetime. And this really matters. It changes how we think about things like focus and self-control. Your ability to concentrate isn't some mysterious willpower. It's just the result of having a specific task set active in your executive memory, which makes one set of rules more likely to fire than another. It gives us a real mechanical way to understand how we actually achieve our goals. And that kind of leaves us with a final, pretty deep question. If our sense of being in control is really just an automatic process, a cascade of rules firing based on whatever's in front of us, what does it actually mean to be in charge of our own minds? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.